So in this video, we are going to be talking about the role of empathy in terms of conflict management, and the progression of your own growth and expansion. So let's first define what empathy is. It is that ability to see yourself and others, to understand their perspective, to take a step back, and as we were talking earlier, do that active listening, really be present in terms of that ability to understand the other. And it is moving into your feeling energy, okay? When we think about empathy, when we talk about empathy and being an empath, it is the feelings that we have. We feel the world around us. We're more tethered in energetically to the world around us, and we are open. We're more permeable in terms of that empathetic understanding. So when we are integrating empathy into our conflict resolution, it has a very beautiful effect on that synergy that is created between either two individuals or groups of people.
And it's having that responsibility with the empathy as well. It's not going too empathetic. Right. If there's that narcissistic empath verbiage that's being used this day, but really the extreme end of the spectrum on the empath side and the extreme end of the spectrum on the narcissist side, it's really the same energy. One's the perpetual aggressor, the other one's the perpetual victim. Both are toxic traits. So it's finding that ability to provide empathy in a conversation where we're able to see maybe where the other person's coming from, but also still holding your own energy, so you're not being pulled into a vortex of another person by feeding their victimness or feeding their aggressiveness. It's being able to still have that self-accountability, that self-responsibility of the role in there. So you're being empathetic in terms of what you're feeling plus what they're feeling, and finding that counterpoint to where it is a balance. It's not feeding too much in the victim and certainly not feeding the aggressor.
Yeah, because it's all about growth. And we always want to elicit, in terms of our dialogue and our communication, a style that is going to help both parties learn and grow and evolve. Because this is the whole underpinning of what life is about. Life is an evolution. And so I love how you brought up this idea of not being overly empathetic. And I think this is, the age that we're going through now. We're having a balancing out of the feminine and masculine energies. Sometimes, that unbalanced female can be overly emotional, be in her victimhood, not be standing in a grounded, logical place. And on the other side of that, a masculine energy in its wounded state would be a bit of a bully, an aggressor, non-empathetic. So we have to understand that spectrum of, we want to impart empathy, we want to have it as part of our, part of that tool in our toolkit when we deal with conflict, but we don't want to be so much, overly empathetic to the point that we are letting the other one yank us around with, foolish emotionality either.
Right, it's life's about balance, and that's the interesting thing with growth as well. It is possible to outgrow someone. It is have that possibility that sometimes conflict can arise just from one party's desire to grow and the other party's desire not to grow. And that can be seen as a threat. And there is a possibility of outgrowing, and you can't force a person to come along with you in their growth. Mm-hmm. But a good, solid, stable relationship that has understanding and has, the ability to resolve conflict, you are both growing immediately if you're resolving the conflict. And sometimes people can grow in two different ways and kind of merge back in together. Mm-hmm. It's understanding our own responsibilities in this life and our own responsibilities in this world, and taking that first step by trying to see it through another person's eyes and saying, hey, what is this person really trying to feel, and showing that empathy to gain an understanding of where a person's coming from, not necessarily doing it to give them sorrow or pity or sympathy, but to really ascertain more of an understanding of the situation than it is to feed the feelings of inadequacy or sorrow or victimness.
Well, and I think this is something that every parent goes through, right? Because there is the teenage years and the early adult years where every young person thinks that their parent is nuts and that their parent has nothing, intelligent to say. And, you want to be empathetic. You want to be able to have that dialogue and not have conflict in terms of your relationship with your children. And your children obviously want to have relationship with the parent. But there is a time where you tend to move away, right? There's that point where the child has to leave the nest, and you can't bend to every crisis that the child is bringing into the home, and you have to kind of keep an even keel and be a little bit logical. So having empathy has its place, but you don't want to be so empathetic that you're trampled over in your relationships. And I really hear that's what you're saying.
Well, the interesting thing about the child leaving home analogy is that most parents dread the day when their kid's going to grow up and move out of the house. But they'll also come to the point where they'll do their job to make sure you're ready for it. I've got an older teenager now, and I'm not looking forward to it, but I know when it's time, he's going to do his job to make sure I'm ready for him to go. It's like, all right, pal, you need to get your own place. Yeah. But in the meantime, you kind of dread those conversations. It's that leaving the nest thing. That's a big thing, right? And it's having that empathy with your children of being able to realize, hey, they're young, they're just trying to figure out life. And sometimes in conflict resolution, hey, this is a young process. We're just trying to figure out how to do this. And that's why we do this video, is that we're all constantly learning. There is no absolute definitive finish line. It's constant evolution. It's constant new types of conflicts with different types of people. But it's being able to constantly develop the skills that maybe we start to see associations of how we resolve past conflicts to being able to resolve this one, or the experience of previous conflicts to be able to navigate through a new situation.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you pointed out that sometimes there's this coming together and moving apart. And in terms of empathy, I think there's also a scale. So there are situations in terms of your interpersonal relationships where empathy makes sense, like with a child or with a family member, and maybe there needs to be a certain extended level of empathy, or perhaps less empathy if the child is pushing the boundaries or the family member is pushing the boundaries. And then when you get into, say, conflict in the corporate world, less empathy needs to be given sometimes, because again, it is a little bit cut and dry. So also keeping in mind what is the appropriate level of empathy based on the type of relationship, right? And the historical nature of that relationship, the lineage of that relationship. If you've had a long-standing relationship with that individual, maybe a little bit more empathy needs to be utilized. If it's a fairly new relationship or a fairly platonic and not very involved relationship, maybe the conflict resolution can be a little bit more surface level. So understanding that any of these concepts that we're teaching also have to be looked through the lens of what the actual extenuating circumstances around that particular conflict actually are as well.
Well, that also goes to high level versus low level societies as well. And that doesn't necessarily mean high functioning, lower functioning, smarter. It's just a term that means that we use more of our senses to recognize different traits. High level societies, a lot of Asian and Latin societies in civilizations, they do recognize that not only is it the words that are being spoke, but it's also the body language, the eye movements, the tonality. A variety of different factors are taken into consideration when it comes to the communication of one another in business or in conversation. Where a lot of Western nations, North America, Europe, are more low level societies in terms of we take the spoken word at face value. This is the spoken word. This is what that person says. I mean, how many times have we ever been in an argument and heard, you said this, these are your exact words, and this is exactly what you said. That's a low level conversation. So we also have to be able to recognize what is the type of person that we're working with. What is the energy? Is this person someone that reads more into what the body language is, what the eye contact is, what the tonality is, or is this a cut and dry, these are your exact words of what you said type person, a low level way of communicating. And so it's being able to recognize that, and you'll be able to choose the appropriate amount of empathy required for those individual situations. Somebody's trying to carjack you, you're not going to use a lot of empathy. But if a little 4-year-old fell off a swing and cut his knee, you're certainly not going to say, hey, why did you be on that swing? You're going to say, all right, bud, let's get you cleaned up and we'll deal with this now. What did you learn? And you get a little bit of understanding so the child feels safe. And sometimes we all want to feel safe. Sometimes we have to stand up for ourselves.
Absolutely. And that circles back to roles and responsibilities. You know, in terms of conflict management too, depending on your role, you're going to have more responsibility to see the conflict management through, to see the resolution through, and to take, you know, a more calm and appropriate role. If I am the principal at a high school, or if I'm a judge or a mediator, it's going to be a very different role than, you know, if I'm the 16-year-old stealing the gum from the corner store, right? So we all have to look at what role we're playing and to appropriate ourselves responsibly to that role as well.
Well, that's a good point with the judge. A judge is situated in a position where their bias and emotions are supposed to be removed from it.
Yep.
The emotions are supposed to be dialed down. They're going to listen to both sides without judgment before they come to a decision. And so if you're able to be the higher functioning person at that particular point in a conversation, then sometimes the emotion or feelings being hurt, feeling defensive or threatened, sometimes we need to take that accountability of dialing it down ourselves and saying, okay, let's look at this rationally. Let's calm the situation down so we can have control over ourselves and then move forward with our attempts for resolution.
Absolutely. So I'm going to wrap up this video with you, Neil, and we are going to roll into the overview in this leg of the race of the conflict resolution course. And we'll see you in that, and hopefully see you in the next segment of this program.